Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. We have just ended up the 29th talks summit Russia-EU. Our meeting obviously was good and fruitful for Russia and the EU. We face same challenges, especially in economical and financial fields. It requires rapid coordination of approaches to the solving very similar tasks. I think my colleagues will agree that during the summit we managed to prove the priority character of Russian and EU strategic partnership. The common understanding of necessity to move forward to achieve the situation when citizens of Russia and EU would practically feel the advantages of our partnership. We informed our colleagues on developing integration process in the territory of CIS from the point of view of their perspective of Russian-EU relations. We are convinced that the single economic space future Eurasian economic union is absolutely compatible with the tasks of strengthening of cooperation between Russia and the EU. Of course, it was really important to discuss during the preparation of a new basic agreement between Russia and EU. From the two sides, the interest was proved, the interest in developing a document where the strategic goals will be formulated and that would be adequate to the needs of today. The main stumbling stone is the economic issue of this agreement. We agreed to continue informal consultations in order to find mutually beneficial solutions. We consider the possibilities in trade and economic cooperation in the context of joining to WTO. We discussed how it can be used for the development of our trade and economic links in order to settle problem issues that still exist. I would like to stress our gratitude to European Union and the European Commission for the graduate support of Russia in the process of joining WTO. Obviously, we discussed the problems to achieving visa-free regime for traveling between Russia and EU. The existing visa barriers is an obstacle for development of humanitarian contacts and economy. We also analyze how the joint initiative of partnership for modernization is being implemented. We will go on working in order to achieve a number of large joint processes with the participation of Russian and EU businesses, with the participation of our financial institutions, keeping in mind the agreements that we have already achieved between our large financial entities. A very big part of our plenary session was aimed at our energy partnership. One of the key basis for our relations in economic field. Still, we have questions that require further discussion and settlement. But in the context of importance of time-proved cooperation between Russia and EU, we are looking forward to achieve mutually acceptable solutions. One more trouble problem was discussed, unilateral decision of the EU from the 1st January of 2012, European system of trade for emission quotas on civil aviation of the third countries. We discussed the humanitarian issues of the dialogue Russia-EU and the most topical questions of international and regional agenda. This is the situation in Syria, Iran, the Middle East, and in a number of other territories. I would like to stress once again that the discussion we had today was fruitful, productive. Obviously, not all the positions are the same, but I think that we proved our determination to this course and to send a sharp political signal towards strengthening our cooperation. Now we have to move with the same speed forward. I want to thank our partners and experts who did a lot in order to prepare our today's meeting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your hospitality. It has been a pleasure to have been invited here to this beautiful place in the vicinity of St. Petersburg. This is my first summit with you, Mr. President, but it is my clear understanding that we even this time at the 29th EU-Russia summit have confirmed our joint commitment to further develop the EU-Russia strategic partnership. As you all know, the results of the 2 last years are remarkable. The Russian WTO accession, the Partnership for Modernization, and the common steps toward a visa-free travel. The EU-Russia relationship is enjoying its best dynamics for years. However, there is still much we need to do in order to untap what is potentially possible. Strong political will and hard work will therefore be needed even in the coming years. I therefore welcome President Putin's commitment to bringing this work further together with the European Union. We had talks on our broad bilateral agenda and on global issues such as the economy and some of the more pressing international issues. I would like to highlight the following points. First, on the economy. For Europe, these are testing times. But we are driven by a clear commitment, a clear determination to work our way through the challenges. We are aiming at strengthening growth in the European Union. There are many initiatives in the making, and we will take further decisions for growth and jobs at the European Council in June. We are also addressing systemic challenges for the economic and monetary union as such. We must strengthen the monetary union by more banking, fiscal, economic integration, and enhance governance and democratic accountability. I'm working on building blocks for the deepening of the economic and monetary union in close cooperation with the President of the European Commission and report to the European Council in June. Let me be clear, there is no way back for the euro. There is only the way ahead towards more integration. We want, by the way, Greece to stay in the Eurozone while respecting its commitments. Second, on the EU-Russia bilateral relationship, we reconfirmed that the best basis for closer partnership should be an ambitious and comprehensive bilateral new agreement that includes trade and investment. In this context, we look forward to the ratification of Russia's WTO accession. The idea of a Eurasian economic union if based on the WTO rules could lead to positive contribution to trade, prosperity and cooperation. Third, the EU wants to be Russia's partner in its modernization. And that's why I see the further development of the Partnership for Modernization as one of the priorities in our relations. It should be a partnership that covers all aspects of modernization, the economy, society, and the rule of law. I made a point today that a vibrant civil society should in this respect be seen as an integral part for real modernization. The greater engagement of civil society opens opportunities for the further development of political institutions and pluralism in Russia, which should not be missed. Civil society was a force of progress in our own history, and they can be one in yours, in Russia's. Fourth, vis-à-vis travel remains our common goal. Easier contact between people are the backbone of closer relations and benefits for all of us. I therefore welcome the active work on the implementation of the so-called common steps and the progress made in the negotiations on an upgraded EU-Russia visa facilitation agreement. 5, on human rights, it is welcome that Russia shows readiness for public debate on human rights as exemplified by the recent hearing in the Russian State Duma. This is a recognition that human rights concerns are a matter of direct concern to all. And that is why these issues, together with the rule of law and preservation of political rights, need to be addressed. We have invited Russia to the next round of EU-Russia human rights consultations to Brussels, the 29th of June. Next time, we hope for Russia to host the consultations. Finally, we had the discussions on a range of foreign policy issues. On Syria, let me first say that the situation is appalling. The Syrian regime should immediately cease all forms of violence and provide its full support to the UN supervision mission. The European Union and Russia might have some divergent assessments, but we fully agree that the Annan Plan as a whole provides the best opportunity to break the cycle of violence in Syria, avoiding a civil war, and in finding a peaceful, lasting solution. We need to combine our efforts in order for this to happen and to find common messages on which we agree. We need to walk towards an immediate stop of all forms of violence in Syria and towards a process of political transition. On Iran, we agree on the urgent need to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The EU and Russia are working closely together and with other partners on this issue, and we look forward to the next round of talks in Moscow, where the EU High Representative Cathy Ashton will lead the negotiations of 6 countries with Iran. As regards our common neighbourhood, I reiterated the EU's support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia, and we believe that the agreement of the commitments of 2008 should be fully implemented. Lastly, the EU welcomes Russia's constructive approach in the 5+2 negotiations in the Transnistria conflict. Mr. President, it has been a pleasure to have attended this constructive meeting. I look forward to see you in Brussels next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. President Putin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank President Putin for his warm welcome here in the St. Petersburg region. I have always valued a frank and open dialogue with President Putin, and indeed we had this kind of dialogue during this summit. I believe it is particularly appropriate that we hold this European Union-Russia summit so early in the beginning of this mandate of the President of Russia, and also in the beginning of a new government. Russia and Europe are experiencing important political, economic, and social transformations. A new cycle is opening, and this offers us the opportunity to look ahead and think strategically on our cooperation, what we want to achieve, and where we want to be 5 years' time and further ahead. In recent years, we have made significant progress on a number of issues, namely on the agreement for Russia's WTO accession, an objective that, as you know, the European Union and the European Commission have always supported. There was also some progress on visa and mobility and on our partnership for modernization. Therefore, the purpose of this summit was to consolidate the progress achieved and to launch the basis for a closer cooperation. Last evening, we had a very comprehensive exchange of views on the global economic situation, the latest developments in Russia and in Europe. Let me, in this regard, just mention our full confidence in the future of the euro area and of the European Union. In fact, the debate now in the European Union is not how we are going to undo the integration. The whole debate is how are you going to further deepen the integration, to complement our monetary union with a full economic union, including in some areas like the banking sector, supervision, and also in some fiscal aspects. So no one should be in any doubt. There is absolute determination in the European Union and in the euro area to the euro and to the solidity and the further integration of all our efforts. And I think this is important for Russia because Russia is our largest neighbor and a very close strategic partner. We should build upon our strong ties and advance negotiations of the new comprehensive EU-Russia agreement, which should cover all the relevant areas of partnership, including trade, investment and energy, and lay the basis of a closer relation. I'm convinced that with the firm commitment of both sides, we will achieve a balanced and ambitious agreement that will be both beneficial for Russia and for the European Union. The European Union is already Russia's biggest commercial partner, accounting for around 50% of all Russian trade. It's also the biggest source of foreign direct investment. The European Union is the biggest client of the most important export from Russia, I mean energy. And Russia's WTO accession opens additional opportunities for trade and for the development of our bilateral economic relationships. We believe this can be very important for the future. Our partnership for modernization is now in a phase of full implementation, and I am happy to say that President Putin sees it as a priority. Russia is engaged in a very important process, and we are very proud to be partners of Russia in that regard. Building a partnership between our societies means also having closer relationship between our peoples. This is why the visa issue and the mobility issue are so important. We are now engaged in the implementation of the common steps towards visa-free travel that we have launched last summit. We welcome the substantial progress made in negotiations on an upgraded EU-Russia visa waiver agreement, which should be finalized soon. Positive developments in these fields have clear potential benefits for our citizens and for people-to-people contacts. On energy, we welcome the progress in the energy dialogue and the close EU-Russia energy partnership. I stress that the reliable, transparent, rules-based energy framework remains a key priority for the European Union. So this summit has confirmed the important common interests we share and our willingness to build stronger relations and work even closer together. As the most famous Russian poet, Alexander Pushkin, who has studied, lived, and died in St. Petersburg, once wrote, and I quote, "We can try and fail, but we should not fail to try." The European Union is looking forward to try and not to fail. Is looking forward to try and to succeed. And I'm sure we will succeed in this partnership with Russia. I thank you for your attention.
Уважаемые журналисты, сейчас вы сможете задать 4 вопроса, по 2 от международных СМИ и от российских. Начинаем с международных СМИ. Пожалуйста.
Thank you. In this regard, I want to give the floor first to the correspondent of Dow Jones News and the Wall Street Journal.
Ira Yosabashvili, Dow Jones Newswire's Wall Street Journal. 2 questions. For President Van Rompuy, there's been a lot of work going into forming a banking union, towards promoting ESM lending to banks. In your opinion, what happens if these important steps are not successful? Would the survival of the euro be at risk? The second question is to Vladimir Vladimirovich. Я на русском спрошу.
This in Russian. Distinguished Vladimir Vladimirovich, today in the hotel where the Kremlin pool stayed overnight, they gave us these bulletins where it spells out the following. No to the Russian Pinochet. Next, hundreds of oppositioners were in prisons and concentration camps on the will of this man, and it ends up Putin should be in prison and should be shamed. What's your response to that? Thank you.
Well, in the regards to the so-called political prisoners in Russia, no matter where I have been, there's the one issue is erasing the destiny of Mr. Khodorkovsky. As you know, the European Human Rights Court registered that the criminal case and the indictment of Mr. Khodorkovsky, there are no political motives. So if I'm going to prison only in a good company, as regards other cases of such as regards other such cases, then we should make clear who we are talking about. I know that the violation of public events rules, we have administrative measures against those who violate these rules, and I know that all those people are at large and they are preparing for new events, but it's normal, and I believe that we should introduce in our legislation such norms, such rules of the European law that are applied in to the events of this kind. I believe that these events are both democratic, but at the same time they create the certain regime for the holding of such events. As to the call towards sending Mr. Barroso to the change stake, I believe that the author of this bulletin means the position of Mr. Barroso on the third energy package. I would like to inform all the stakeholders that we have expressed our concern with this document, and I hope that we will be able to settle these issues through the negotiations. In any case, we deem it unacceptable the distribution of these or other documents in retrospect on all the extension of these documents to all the contracts that were already signed before this energy package went into force. But at the same time, I would like to say that the author of this bulletin has aroused some sympathy in me, but the question is only in the way why did he distribute this in such an unusual way. There are other methods to do that. As you know, we have adopted laws on liberalizing the activities of democracy parties, and now the group of persons can establish their own democracy party and promote their people to parliaments, and there stand for the implementation of the ideals that they deem.
Regarding the issue that was now mentioned by President Putin about the third energy package, I had the occasion during the summit to clarify our position. This is agreed legislation for all the member states, and it will be implemented in an objective and non-discriminatory manner. And we believe all aspects of it are fully compatible with international law. It's important to understand that the internal market is in constant evolution. Decisions to liberalize several sectors, not only energy, but also telecommunications, postal services, and so on and so forth, are taken to increase competition and transparency and not to create any difficulty for any operator. Regarding Russian operators, they are more than welcome in the European energy internal market. They are indeed welcome, and in fact they are already benefiting, for instance, downstream of some openings that this third energy package is giving to them. Having said this, we are always ready to discuss with our Russian partners and other partners any specific concerns that may happen in a specific way of implementing this legislation in a different in this or that member state. And in fact, we are doing so because we want to keep the confidence in our energy relationship with Russia, and we very much value this relationship. It is, I believe, very important both for Russia and for the European Union. So this third energy package was indeed, as President Putin just mentioned, one of the issues that we have discussed. I cannot say that we fully agree, but I think we can say that there is now a really willingness of both sides to engage constructively in the discussion of many aspects of a very important relationship. This is the energy relationship between Russia and the European Union.
I have to answer on your more prosaic question about banking integration. So just I recall you that I received a mandate from the European Council last week to draft a report on a deepening of the economic and monetary union. I will make this report in close cooperation with inter alia, the President of the European Commission. In this report, I will mention the main building blocks for this deepened economic and monetary union. And I will make a proposal on a working method to achieve this objective. In those building blocks, banking integration is an important chapter. And in the chapter of banking integration, I will deal at this stage on supervision, on deposit insurance, and on resolution. So we are working on it. It is the beginning only of the work. I will present building blocks and a working method, and we go on with that work later on, and hopefully we can achieve and present results of that work already by the end of this year. What will happen if we fail? I never answer to hypothetical questions, because we will not fail. We will not fail. In the meantime, we have to deal with banking problems in several of our member states. And what we are working on in the deepening of the economic and monetary union is in some way irrelevant for those immediate problems. And those immediate problems, we have to tackle them together with the member states.
Добрый день, агентство Интерфакс, Георгий Гулиев.
Good day, Interfax agency Georgi Gulian. There is a very difficult situation in global economy and in Eurozone, and it affects the prices of energy resources coming from Russia. So I have a question for Mr. Rompuy and Mr. Barroso. You are talking about the fact that you will not fail, but will Europe be able to develop common position on their exit from crisis, given into account the positions of France and Germany? And my question to Mr. Putin: how the difficult situation in Eurozone will affect the supplies of energy to Europe, and will Russia be forced to correct its budget due to the fall in oil prices? Thank you. Okay, let me begin so that my colleagues will have time to become ready to the answer. Of course, the economic situation in Europe affects directly the economy of the Russian Federation. We are closely interconnected, as I've already mentioned, and our trade for the last year was worth $304 billion. In 2010, it was $306 billion, so the growth is quite significant. Of course, if the situation in Europe will lead to recession, to the shrinkage of economy and the volume of consumption of produce from Russia, especially petroleum chemistry products, it will affect us directly. So we hope that our colleagues in the European Union will be able to overcome present difficulties. Judging by what we have heard today and yesterday, our European colleagues are very determined. They have a very professional approach, and I am fully confident in saying that. And I can say that these are not futile words. This is a very well-balanced policy. And I believe that even if we assume some disruptions, some unexpected events, the forecast is very optimistic. And even in our country, we are ready to fully support this process because it is in our interests. As regarding the budget component, today, in this year, we have calculated our budget spending judging from $100 per barrel. Then we have calculated it judging by $115 per barrel, and all the rest we are allocating to reserve funds. The next year we have planned calculating as $97 per barrel, so the budget hasn't been approved yet, and we will see how the global and European economy will develop and make respective adjustments. Anyway, we are not expecting any shocks here, and we can expeditiously respond to any development of situation.
I'd like to say, by the way, President Putin already mentioned it, that in fact 2011 was already an year of growth of Russian exports in gas to Europe. So it shows that sometimes all the talk about these consequences of the situation in Europe is very much exaggerated. So not only Europe is by far the biggest buyer of Russian gas, but there has been an increase last year in spite of the situation of some difficulties that exist in Europe, about which we are extremely open and that we discussed with all our partners, of course also with Russia. From that point of view, I would like to thank President Putin for the words he just had regarding his confidence in the determination of the European Union leaders and Euro area leaders to overcome these difficulties. I can tell you that I have also full confidence in that determination. There are, of course, difficulties, but those difficulties are in some member states. Overall, the euro area is indeed in a best position than many of our counterparts in terms of macroeconomic stability. But it is true that because the euro has not yet completed all the instruments of financial integration, we need to go further. And that's exactly, as President Van Rompuy just mentioned, what we are doing now at European level. Some of these measures take time. And the message we convey to our partners around the world, and that we have discussed yesterday evening with the President of Russia, is precisely to explain the difficulties, the challenges in a very objective manner, but also the complex responses we are bringing. And the response in Europe certainly cannot be one of artificially now creating growth. It will be a mistake. It will be a mistake also for our partners. The interest for Europe and for our partners is to have sustainable growth in Europe. And to have sustainable growth in Europe, we need fiscal consolidation, because some countries have gone over what was reasonable in terms of public debt and deficits, is of course to promote structural reforms for competitiveness and also in some cases targeted investment. And this is very important to understand, and I'm sure that our partners have interest that Europe gets out of the current difficulties with sustainable growth and not something that is purely artificially, and that will not be the right response. And so from that point of view, it was also a very good summit, the one we had today and yesterday, because it allows us to understand, for instance, what are the main challenges for Russia, because there are also challenges here for Russia, but what are the challenges for us in the European Union? And if I may, there is for me a very obvious conclusion, is that we need to do more together. I really believe that it is in the interest of the European Union and Russia that are so close and with such an important relationship to do more things together, because trade, investment is also a very important driver for growth. And that is precisely a conclusion that I draw from our talks today and yesterday.
Thank you. I should like to invite... Yes?
I would add some comments on it, but very briefly. We have to put a lot of nuances in this blaming in some way of the Eurozone for the so-called problems of the world economy. First of all, we have our problems, they are very well known, but world economic growth is also suffering from problems in some of the emerging economies, not the Russian economy, of course, but some of the emerging countries are facing huge problems. And also this is an element of explaining a certain slowdown of the economic growth. So Eurozone is not the main responsible for a slower economic growth on the world scale. Second nuance is that by the end of this year, we will have positive economic growth in the Eurozone as a whole, and even a a rather strong recovery in Western European countries. And for 2013, we have in any case positive economic growth between 1 and 2%. Last nuance on growth is that what we are living now, what we are experiencing now, you can't compare this with the huge financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, coming from the other side of the ocean. Then at that time, we had overall in Europe, in the European Union, a recession of -4%. We are not at that stage. Huh? Even the most worst figures are -0.3% for this year. So we have to compare what has to be compared. Last remark is, can we overcome this crisis? Will there be, again, agreements in the European Union? I have now chaired 15 meetings of the European Council, 15. There was never a failure. Each time we made progress. There is much more European integration now than there was 3 or 4 years ago. According to some, it is too little and too late, but each time we agreed with 17 or with 27. And we will do so again, on the growth agenda in June, and on the building blocks for deepening an economic and monetary union. At the end of the process, we will have more Europe, not less Europe. And we will overcome this crisis step by step. It will take time, because the problems in some of our member states are profound problems. We hadn't the necessary tools in the beginning to deal with the crisis. We have now set into motion a lot of new instruments. But again, each European Council was a productive one, and this of June and December will also be the case. And let's be sure that France and Germany are not the only ones in the European Union, in the Eurozone. But I'm quite convinced that a long tradition of cooperation will continue between those two countries. But we need the consent not of 2 countries, we need the consent of 17 in the Eurozone and 27. And that's my responsibility.
Thank you. I should like to give the floor to the correspondent of El País.
Bonnet, El País.
I have one question to President Putin and Mr. Barroso, practically the same question from different perspective. In your previous president cycle, you said that as soon as Russia will be adhering to the WTO, that would give a boost to working on the new basic agreement. How is this statement true today, when the situation has changed, when the oil prices are falling, when there is the negative public opinion in those sectors of Russia who would suffer from Russia's adherence to WTO, when Russia is a part of the customs union? How this statement made by you remains true? I mean that the adhesion to WTO is a minimum economic block of the basic agreement. And Mr. Barroso, I'd like...
In your opinion, how will the integration of Russia in the WTO, what influence will it have to the elaboration of the new Treaty of Partnership and Cooperation? Thank you.
Well, let us begin with the WTO. We have seen the risks for separate sectors of Russian economy when we adhere to WTO. There are risks, but the instruments which we use within the requirements of the WTO make us think that by implementing those tools in our economy, we can minimize those risks for separate directions of industry, that is agriculture, agriculture engineering, car industry, etc. Several instruments are beginning to be used. They are in full agreement with the WTO requirements, and other WTO member states are using these instruments as well. That's the first. Second, during the talks, including talks with the European countries, we agreed that on several directions of our activities in several sectors of economy, we will use the so-called transitional period, and that we will join to the WTO requirements step by lowering the level of customs protection and taking other commitments on ourselves. By the way, the level of customs protection, even after Russia's adhesion to WTO, would be higher than the customs protection level at Ukraine. We are more concerned about that than the mere fact of Russia's adhesion to WTO, because we have a lot of economic interaction with Ukraine. But that's a serious matter which the Russian government needs to take care of. But on the whole, we will follow the reached agreements and we will implement them. Another matter is whether we have for a long time have been working, and we've continued discussions today, on the preparation of the new basic agreement. I would not hide it, there is no secret that during the talks our European colleagues place issues in front of us and place the demands and requirements which, as we think, go beyond the commitments which Russia has taken during the adhesion to the WTO. This is an approach which we call WTO plus. We can't agree with these requirements yet, taking into account that we have just finished the talks on the adhesion to WTO, so we can't take any additional commitments to us, because these commitments would have to be spread on all the WTO countries, or our negotiations package with other countries should be then reviewed, and separate relations between the EU and Russia should be created, ignoring the interests of other participants of the WTO. But we understand each other, and we will very professionally and densely and expertly discuss these problems. As far as the customs union and the common single economic area is concerned, and our further integration processes with the European Union, we see no contradictions in that. I have said about that because we make the rules of the customs union and the single economic space fully, completely. I'd like to highlight that. We have prepared and signed documents fully and completely based on the principles of the WTO. Moreover, our partners, Kazakhstan and Belarus, have taken unprecedented decisions and agreed that the requirements and conditions of Russia's adhesion to the WTO would be accepted by them as well. They have agreed to do that, and I think that this is a very courageous step from the political authorities of these governments, and I hope that the EU would take this into account and support these countries when they will adhere to WTO.
Yes. Relation between WTO membership of Russia and the new agreement. First of all, it's obvious that this new agreement has to be compatible with WTO. And as you know, we have very much supported the WTO membership of Russia. In fact, what was strange was that Russia was not a member of the WTO. It was the only major economy not member. And so it's quite natural that now this happens. It's not a secret that we have very much supported. In fact, the final negotiations, it's also not a secret that I also spoke with, at that time, Prime Minister Putin, to try to handle some issues that were still pending. And I'm very happy about the cooperation, so that Russia is now becoming a full member of WTO. And I'm sure this is also in the interest of the Russian people, for all reasons. It's true that there are some transitional issues to be safeguarded, and in fact Russia was able to address these issues in a very, let's say, determined way. Now, Today we had also very good discussion about this new agreement, and our understanding, if I remember correctly, was that in new agreement there will be also parts of it related to trade and to investment, as it was in fact agreed in a previous summit. It will be a comprehensive, ambitious and balanced agreement, covering most important areas of our cooperation. But our intention is not at all to ask from Russia new tariff reduction beyond what was already done in the WTO. At the same time, we believe there are some issues that are trade-related that are important. For instance, regulatory convergence that can make life easier for businessmen, both in Russia and in the European Union. And we would like to discuss this with our Russian partners. And of course, as President Putin said, this is now something for our experts now to meet and to negotiate. But we believe there is a potential, not adding more obligations to the WTO, not at all. That is not our intention. And of course, we certainly, Russia, a position we respect it. But to put also an important part of our new agreement covering also the very important economic relationship between Russia and the European Union. So this was, I think, the conclusion of today's good exchanges on this matter.
At the end of the press conference, the question from the Russian mass media.
Thank you so much, Tartas. First question, continuation of the topic of a single economic space. Whether the perspectives of cooperation of the EU was discussed, zones of trade, were they discussed? And the other question is about visas. Civil servants give a lot of information about visas, both the reports from Russia and from EU are composed of 200 pages, and there's a competition for their translation. And I'm one of the citizens who faced the situation when we have problems with the getting a Schengen visa. One of the stories was already told while visiting France. That's my question to the European leaders. Maybe there are some perspective of going to visa-free regime, or is this question already behind? Thank you. As for visa problem, you know our position. We are moving. We are ready to move towards visa-free regime even faster. And the ball is on the side of our European partners. We see all the difficulties, and Mr. Barroso has said that it's not only the issue of the European Commission. It should be agreed by dozens of countries, and different countries, they feel different about that. And as for the inflow of labor migrants from Russia, this concerns are exaggerated. Criminal elements, the same. If they want, they move to Europe. They are moving to Europe and from Europe, and only businessmen who follow the law, the journalists and citizens, they are the ones who suffer, who want to have personal relations with their relatives and their close friends, etc., and partners. So I hope that we will go on moving towards. The first question was, and was there? We said already. I answered this question. I can say once again, I think that today direct negotiations between the Commission of Joint Economic Space, Single Economic Space, and European Commission are planned to take place, because a number of issues were transferred to national body, and now even if we want to do it, we cannot during the negotiation process with the European Union, we cannot discuss a number of questions that are part of our national competence. We transferred it to the national body, but as our colleagues have cleared it for me, they don't have, European Commission has no mandate to negotiate with this organization. They have a mandate to negotiate with Russia, but I think that this mandate must be received, because the reality is the following. They require join our common efforts to make a single economic space.
regarding the visa, as I said before, we are seeing some progress there. We are now engaged in the implementation of the so-called common steps towards visa-free travel that were launched last summit. And there was progress made in negotiations on an upgraded EU-Russia visa waiver agreement, which I hope will be finalized soon. Our goal remains visa-free travel. As you know, there are still some technical issues that are important to fulfill. You mentioned those reports, yes. This was very serious work, both by the Russian administration and by the European Union administrations. We have to check all this, but we are determined to make this happen, and I believe it is in the interest also of Europe. In fact, I can tell you that one of the important areas in which we are looking is tourism. There are many tourists of Russia going to European Union, and certainly it is in our interest to have more tourists from Russia. In fact, there have been a lot more. Just some days ago, I was in the Baltic Summit, where Russia was also represented by Vice Prime Minister Shukalov, and all the prime ministers of the region were giving us the figures about the increase of visits. It's amazing. For instance, the number of the Russians going to this neighbor Finland. We are here very close to Finland in St. Petersburg, because we are now systems that are already more flexible in terms of multiple entries with the same visa. But I agree it's not enough. We should do further, and that's where we are working. And it depends, of course, on the political will of all the 27 member states, but also on some technical matters that have to be addressed by the Russian authorities. And I hope that we'll see progress in the not distant future in this area that I know is very important for the Russian citizens, namely young citizens, but not only. Also, it is very much in the interest of the European Union, as I've already stated.
Thank you. Spasiba.
Thank you. As you know, 1 second please, when we were performing building in one of, builders found something valuable when they were building. It was hidden in 1917. It was brought up, and we offer to our European colleagues to go and see these valuable things that were found. The representatives of media are free to do it as well. Thank you.